I've been with the United States Coast Guard for 15 years. I'm stationed at Remote Light Station number 47, approximately 32 miles off the coast of Alaska. It's a desolate outpost that most guardsmen pray they'll never be assigned to. The ones who do get stationed here either transfer out within 6 months or, well, they don't transfer at all. I've survived here longer than anybody else, not because I'm overly brave or skilled, but because I stick to a very strict set of rules. 6 rules that have kept me breathing when others have vanished into the black waters or worse, much worse. Before I share my stories, let me tell you the rules. Memorize them if you ever find yourself at Station 47. 1. Never respond to distress calls during a new moon. 2. If you see yourself in the water, do not look away until it disappears. 3. Count the lighthouse flashes. If it's not 4, stay inside. 4. Never follow the singing no matter how familiar the voice. 5. If the fog turns red, seal all windows and doors immediately. 6. When the radio static forms words, unplug it and wait until the morning. My first encounter with the truth about Station 47 came 3 weeks into my assignment. I was young, eager, and stupidly confident that my training had prepared me for anything the ocean could throw at me. It was October 13th, 2009. A new moon night where the darkness was so complete it felt like the world ended at the edge of our spotlights. I was manning the radio when the distress call came through.
Mayday, Mayday, this is fishing vessel Lucky Strike. Taking on water. Position approximately 2 miles northeast of Remote Light 47. Request immediate assistance.
The voice was clear and desperate. I could hear water sloshing in the background and men shouting. I reached for the microphone to respond when my chief grabbed my wrist so hard that it left bruises. "Check the moon phase," he said, his weathered pale face in the radio room's dim light. "Sir, there's a vessel in distress." "Check the moon phase." I glanced at the calendar on the wall. New moon, so what? Ships didn't stop sinking just because the moon was invisible. "It's a new moon, sir, but they need help. Protocol states." "Protocol doesn't apply here. Rule number 1, never respond to distress calls during a new moon." "That's insane, we can't just..." The radio crackled again.
Please, anyone. We're going down fast. My son is only 12. Please.
Every instinct screamed at me to help. This is why I joined the Coast Guard, to save lives, to be the difference between a family reunited in empty chairs at Christmas dinner. "Sir, with all due respect, I'm going to..." Chief released my wrist and stepped back. "Fine, but you go alone, and when you don't come back, I'll tell them that you fell overboard." Chills, but not enough to stop me. I grabbed my gear and headed for the dock where our boat awaited. As I prepped for launch, I noticed none of the other guardsmen would meet my eyes. But I was determined and I continued on anyway. The water was glass smooth, which should have been my first warning. October in Alaska, it doesn't do calm seas. My spotlight cut through the darkness as I headed northeast, following the coordinates that I had been given. About 2 miles out, I found something, but it wasn't a sinking fishing vessel. It was another Coast Guard response boat, identical to mine. The registration numbers were worn but visible. RB4419. I knew that number. It was a boat that had gone missing about 3 years prior. I should have turned back then, but instead I pulled alongside and I tied off. The boat was pristine, no barnacles, no weather damage. The engine was still warm. That's when I heard it. The same distress call, word for word, coming from the radio in the boat. But the radio wasn't connected to power. The battery cables hung loose, corroded with age.
Mayday, mayday, this is fishing vessel Lucky Strike.
I scrambled back to my boat, nearly falling into the water in my haste. As I fumbled with the mooring lines, I saw something that made my blood freeze. There was somebody sitting in my boat pilot's seat, somebody wearing the same uniform that I had on, someone with my face. It turned to look at me, and its eyes were black holes filled with stars that shouldn't exist. It smiled with too many teeth, and it reached for the ignition. I don't remember jumping, I don't remember swimming. I only remember the burning in my lungs as I fought to stay afloat in water that had suddenly turned ice cold. My boat, with my doppelganger at the helm, circled me slowly, playing that distress call over and over.
My son is only 12, please.
Each pass it came closer. The water around me began to glow with a sickly shimmer, and things moved against my legs. Things that felt like hands but had too many fingers. I would have died that night if Chief hadn't broken his own rules. He came for me in the station's second boat, hauling me out of the water just as my strength failed. We didn't speak on the ride back, we didn't need to. I had learned my lesson. The next morning, both boats were back in their slips as if nothing had happened. No one mentioned the incident. But I noticed Chief had added another tally mark to the collection scratched into the radio room wall. There were dozens of them, each representing someone who had learned the hard way. 6 months after that first incident, I thought that I understood the dangers that surrounded Station 47. I was wrong, though. The ocean had more lessons to teach, and each one came with a price paid in fear and sanity. It was April, and these spring storms had been brutal. We had been locked down for 3 days straight, waves crashing over the lighthouse gallery, winds that could tear a man off his feet. When it finally calmed down, I volunteered for the first perimeter check. I needed air that didn't taste like recycled fear and instant coffee. The station's artificial island is roughly circular, maybe 300 yards in diameter. A concrete and steel defiance against nature. Built in the 60s for reasons the official records carefully don't specify. I was halfway through my inspection when I saw myself in a tidal pool. Not my reflection, but myself. It was floating face down, Coast Guard uniform darkened with water, hair drifting like seaweed. My first instinct was to look away, to run back to the station and pretend that I had never seen it. But Chief's words echoed in my memory. If you see yourself in the water, do not look away until it disappears. And so I stared. And it stared back because after 30 seconds, the body in the water turned its head to look at me without moving any other part of its form. Its eyes were mine but filled with seawater. Tiny crabs scuttling across the corneas. Help me, it gurgled and salt water poured from its mouth. I'm so cold. Pull me out. I wanted to run, every nerve screamed at me to flee. But I remembered again not to move. Looking away before it goes lets it come ashore. And so I watched as this thing with my face began to move. Not swimming, more like the water was pushing it, sliding it closer to the pool's edge. Its hands, my hands, reached for the concrete lip. Please, it whispered. The water, it's so dark. I've been down here so long. We can trade places, just for a while. You can rest in the cold and quiet, and I can be warm again. I said nothing. Responding to them gives them power. Just watch and wait. It felt like hours had passed. The sun tracked across the sky, and still I stood there, locked in a staring contest with my drowned double. Other guardsmen passed on their rounds. They saw what was happening and gave me a wide berth. This was my test to pass or fail. As the sun began to set, the thing grew agitated. It thrashed in the water, screaming in voices that weren't mine. Men, women, children, all pleading in languages that I didn't recognize. Its face cycled through other features before snapping back to mine. Finally, as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, it let out a shriek that sounded like ship metal tearing and sank backward into the pool. I watched the ripples fade, counted to 100, and then walked back to the station on legs that barely worked. In the common room, Chief handed me a mug of coffee laced with something a little bit stronger. "First time for that, huh?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, it gets easier, the waiting anyway. The watching never does." "What are they?" He was quiet for a long moment. "My best theory. The ocean takes a print of everybody who dies in it, like a photograph made of salt and sorrow. Sometimes those prints wash up here looking for a way back to the warm." "Why here specifically?" "Because this place is a wound in the world, and wounds attract infection." I learned later that 3 people had failed the reflection test before me. The first was found drowned in his bunk, lungs full of seawater despite being 50 feet above the tide line. The second had tried to help a reflection reaching into the water. She had been pulled in. Her body was never recovered, but sometimes on calm days, you could see her standing at the bottom of the deeper pools, beckoning. The worst of all was the third. He had shot his reflection. The bullet had ricocheted off the water's surface and hit him in the exact spot he had aimed at on the doppelganger. He had bled out before help arrived, and his reflection had climbed out of the pool to watch him die. Security footage showed it standing over him for 6 hours before walking into the ocean at sunrise. Now I check every puddle, every window, every surface that might hold a reflection, because the rule doesn't just apply to tidal pools. I've seen myself in coffee cups, in the lighthouse lens, and the polished brass of the station bell. Each time I stop and stare until it sinks away, no matter how long it takes. The lighthouse at Station 47 has stood for 60 years, its automated beacon cutting through fog and darkness without fail. 4 flashes, pause, 4 flashes, a pause again. A rhythm as reliable as a heartbeat. Coast Guard engineers service it monthly, though they never stay overnight. They do their work in daylight and leave before dusk every time. I learned why in November of 2011. I was on night watch monitoring the weather systems from the observation deck. The storm front that we had been tracking had dissipated unexpectedly, leaving us with an eerily clear night. Perfect visibility for miles on end. And that's when I noticed it. The lighthouse beam was off pattern. Only 3 flashes and then a pause. I counted again to be sure, but it was definitely 3. According to protocol, any malfunction in the lighthouse required immediate inspection, but our officer who was training me on night procedures grabbed my shoulder before I could head for the door. "Count them," she said. "I did, 3 flashes, we need to. Now do it again." This time it was 5 flashes, and then 2, and then 7. The lighthouse was cycling through random patterns, its beam erratically sweeping across the water. "Rule 3, my officer said. If it's not 4, stay inside." "But what if there's a ship out there they could run aground?" She pointed to the radar screen. "Empty for 50 miles in every direction. There's never a ship when the count is off." We watched from the observation deck as the lighthouse went mad. 8 flashes, 1, 13. The beam itself changed color, the normal white shifting to amber and then to red, and then a color that I don't even have a name for. Something between purple and black that hurt to perceive. "What causes it?" I asked. "Nobody knows. Started back in the 80s. First few times, they sent engineers out to fix it. We lost 2 men before they established the rule. The lighthouse beam suddenly went dark. The station's emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. In that crimson twilight, I saw them. Ships, dozens of them all around the station. Ancient vessels that I had no business still floating. Wooden whalers, early steamships, a Spanish galleon. They were anchored in perfect circles around us, their deck glowing with a foxfire that made my eyes water. Don't look at the crews, but it was too late for me. They weren't people anymore, maybe they never had been. The figures standing at the rails were composed of kelp and bone, salt crystallized flesh, and sailor knots where their faces should be. They all turned towards us in perfect unison, and the lighthouse exploded back to life. One flash, and the closest ring of ships vanished. 2 flashes, and the second ring was gone. 3 flashes, more ships disappearing with every pulse. And the 4th flash came, and the waters were empty again, and the lighthouse resumed its normal pattern as if nothing had happened. A ghost fleet, my officer said. They show up when the count's wrong. As long as you stay inside, they can't come ashore. What if somebody goes out? It happened before back in 2003. A Coast Guard member thought that he could fix the lighthouse and stop the manifestation. The moment that he stepped outside, every one of those things on those ships turned to stare at him. He made it about 10 steps before he started walking toward the water. Not running, but walking like he was in a trance, straight off the dock. What did you try to stop him? You can't open the doors when the count's off. That's part of the rule, they seal automatically. We watched him walk into the ocean and he never came up. But sometimes when the lighthouse acts up, you can see him out on one of those ships, still in his Coast Guard uniform, standing at the helm of a ship that sank over 200 years ago. I've seen the lighthouse malfunction 18 times since then. Each time I count the flashes and I stay inside. The ghost fleet doesn't always appear, sometimes it's other things. Once the water around the station all turned to glass, and we could see straight down to the ocean floor where something massive was trying to claw its way up. Another time, the lighthouse beam revealed that the station wasn't on an island at all, but on the back of something sleeping. The worst was when it flashed SOS and Morse code for 6 hours straight. We could hear voices on the radio, hundreds of them, all calling for help in languages spanning across the world. Chief ordered us to turn off all communication equipment and stuff our ears with wax, but even then I could feel the voices in my bones, begging to be saved from something that had already consumed them. 4 flashes, pause. That's the only pattern that means safety. Anything else and you seal yourself in and pray that whatever the lighthouse is holding back stays in the deep where it belongs. The automation isn't for our convenience. It's a containment system. And when it fails, we're not meant to fix it. We're meant to hide until it remembers its purpose. There are sounds that don't belong to the ocean. Whale song, yes. Wind and waves, well, certainly. The cry of seabirds and the crack of ice, it's all natural and all to be expected. But at Station 47, you learn to distinguish between what the ocean makes and what uses the ocean to speak. The singing started on a Tuesday in March of 2023. I was repairing weather equipment on the station's north platform when I heard my daughter's voice. "Daddy, Daddy, where are you?" I froze. Sarah was 8 years old and 2,000 miles away in Portland with her mother. There was no way that she could be here, but the voice was perfect. Every paternal instinct fired at once. "Sarah," I called out before I could stop myself. The singing began then, not immediately from Sarah's voice, but joining it. A harmony that made my chest tighten with homesickness. It was the lullaby that I used to sing her when she was a baby. When colic kept her up and only my voice could soothe her. Hush now, my darling, the stars are alight. I took 3 steps toward the edge of the platform before training kicked in. Rule 4, never follow the singing no matter how familiar the voice. But God, it sounded exactly like her. Daddy, I'm scared. The water's so cold. Please come get me. I could see her now just beyond the dock, not floating but standing on the water's surface like it was solid glass. She wore her favorite purple jacket, the one with a unicorn on the back. Her hair was in these same pigtails that I had fixed for her the morning that I had left for this rotation. She was crying and every sob was a knife in my heart. That's not Sarah, I said aloud, forcing the words through gritted teeth. Sarah's in Portland. Sarah is safe. The thing wearing my daughter's face tilted its head. When it smiled, the expression was perfect except for one detail. Sarah had lost her left front tooth. This thing was missing the right. Are you sure, Daddy? Are you really sure that I'm safe? My phone was in my quarters. Station 47 barely got signal on good days, but I had to try. I backed away from the edge, keeping my eyes on the Sarah thing. It followed, walking across the water with steps that didn't disturb the surface. Where are you going, Daddy? Don't you love me anymore? Other voices joined in. My ex-wife crying and saying that she was sorry for the divorce. My mother, who had died 6 years ago, asking why I hadn't visited her grave. My first drill instructor, somehow making cadence sound melodic. They all stood on the water now, a chorus line of perfect imposters. I made it to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The voices grew louder and more insistent. Sarah pressed its face against the window and its features began to run like watercolor in rain. Open the door, Daddy. Let me in. I'm so cold. That's when Chief found me. He had heard the singing from inside. Everybody had. Without a word, he grabbed the fire hose from the emergency station and turned it on full blast, spraying the window where the Sarah thing stood. The water hit it and it screamed in a frequency that made my teeth ache. Not Sarah's voice anymore, but something ancient and hungry and furious at being denied. The singing stopped. The figures on the water dissolved into sea foam. Chief kept the hose running until the tank had emptied and then pulled me inside. First time's always family. They know exactly who to mimic to cause maximum pain. My hands shook as I dialed home. 20 rings before my ex picked up, annoyed at being woken up at 3 a.m. But she put Sarah on and I heard my real daughter's sleepy voice, missing the correct tooth, telling me about her day at school. I stayed on until she fell asleep again, memorizing every inflection and every breath. How do they know? I asked Chief later. How do they know exactly who to be? Best guess, they're not reading our minds, they're reading our hearts. Every person that we love leaves a mark on us. It changes us in tiny ways. These things, they can see those changes. They map them and recreate the source. He poured himself a coffee with hands that had their own tremor. I've been here 12 years. Lost my son in Afghanistan in '09. Every few months he shows up on the water in full dress blues, asking me to come for a swim. How do you stand it? By remembering that the real David is gone. What's out there is just an echo wearing his face. The ocean is full of echoes, and they always want to add us to their collection. Since then, I've heard Sarah 6 more times, and my mother and countless others. They get more creative. Sometimes it's not a loved one, but a stranger asking for help. A child lost and afraid. Once it was even a golden retriever whimpering on an ice floe. They know that we're wired to help and to save and comfort. They use our humanity against us. And the worst part, sometimes but very rarely it actually is someone in distress. We pulled 3 people from the water over the years who were exactly who they claimed to be, but we only know they're real after they're inside and dried off, and verified through multiple database checks. Until then, we assume every voice is a lie, every cry for help a trap. And because it's Station 47, compassion can kill you faster than any storm. Fog is a constant companion this far north. It rolls in like clockwork, thick and gray, turning the world into a 20-foot bubble of visibility. We're equipped for it: foghorns, radar, infrared. What we're not equipped for is when the fog turns red. It happened first on September 15th, 2014. I was 2 years into my posting, confident that I had seen the worst that Station 47 had to offer. Pride goeth before the fall, and the fall here comes in crimson vapor. The day started normal. Maintenance checks, weather reports, the endless paperwork that keeps any government operation running. Around 1400 hours, I noticed an unusual fog bank on the horizon. It was a weird color, almost pink. By 1430, the pink had deepened to rose, and by 1500, it was the color of fresh blood.
Red Fog Protocol.
Chief's voice cracked over the intercom. All hands, seal stations immediately. I was in the equipment room when the announcement came. Through the porthole, I watched the crimson wall approaching. It moved against the wind, flowing like blood spray across the water. Where it touched the ocean, it changed. The water became viscous and thick like syrup. Fish floated to the surface, but they weren't dead. They were transforming, and their scales were spreading like wings, their eyes multiplying. I slammed the porthole shut and spun the seal lock just as the first tendrils reached the station. The fog didn't creep in, it pressed against the glass like something alive, searching for entry points. Where it found gaps and old weather stripping, it pushed through in thin streams that moved with purpose.
Don't let it touch you.
Chief's voice over the intercom.
Full hazmat protocol, now.
I grabbed an emergency respirator and chemical suit from the wall locker. Through the mask's visor, I watched a tendril of red fog explore the room. It moved, examining each surface like a blind man reading braille. When I reached a spider in the corner, the arachnid convulsed and began growing. 8 legs became 16 and then 32. Its web turned into razor wire. The tendril reached for me. I backed against the wall, but there was nowhere to go. Just before it made contact, the electrician burst through the inner door with a canister of industrial sealant. He sprayed the gaps around the porthole, cutting off the fog's entry. The tendril, severed from its source, dissipated with the sound like whispered screaming. "Control room. Chief wants all hands," the electrician said. We made our way through the station's corridors, sealing doors behind us. In the mess hall, we found another person standing perfectly still in the center of the room. Red fog wreathed his body. His eyes were open but showed no whites, just endless swirling crimson. "Hey, Walsh," the electrician called out. Walsh's mouth opened and fog poured out. When he spoke, his voice harmonized with itself in impossible ways. "I can see everything, every moment that was and will be. The station isn't built on a rock, it's built on bones, so many bones. And they're waking up. They're remembering what they were." His body began to change. His skin became translucent, showing a circulatory system that pulsed with red fog instead of blood. His fingers elongated, reaching for us with too many joints. We ran. And behind us, his laughter echoed in frequencies that made the metal walls resonate. We sealed the mess hall door and didn't look back. In the control room, 5 of us had made it. Chief was at the environmental controls, flooding the ventilation system with pure oxygen. "Dilution," he explained. "It won't stop it, but it'll slow it down." Through the reinforced windows, we watched the world go mad. The fog had turned the ocean into a carpet of mutations. Things that had once been seabirds wheeled overhead on wings of exposed muscle and bone. The lighthouse beam cut through the crimson mist, and it revealed shapes in the fog, massive forms that defied perspective, being miles away and pressed against the glass at the same time. "How long does it last?" I asked. "The longest recorded was 8 hours, Chief said. That was in '98. We lost 3 people that time." We waited. The fog probed every seal, every joint, every possible entry. It whispered through the walls, and sometimes it would clear just enough to show us impossible vistas. Cities of coral and bone rising from the waves. Skies where these stars were eyes. Oceans hanging overhead like crimson clouds. After 6 hours, it began to recede. Not dispersing, retreating, flowing back towards some unseen source. As it left, everything that it had touched began to revert. The mutated creatures collapsed into normal fish and birds, dead from transformations that their bodies couldn't survive. The ocean returned to its normal state, though the water remained tinted pink for days. We found Walsh in the mess hall. He was human again mostly. His eyes remained crimson for a week, and he never spoke about what he had seen. He transferred out the next month, a medical discharge for psychological trauma. I heard that he lives in Arizona now, as far from any ocean as he can. The red fog has returned 4 times since, and we're better prepared now, but preparation only goes so far. Each time it finds new ways to try to get in. Last time it came through the water pipes, and the time before it somehow used the electrical wiring as a conduit. When the fog turns red, you seal everything and you pray, because the fog doesn't just want in. It wants to change you and make you part of something vast and alien and hungry. It wants to add your voice to the whispers in the walls, your eyes to these stars that watch, your bones to the foundation that holds Station 47 above the waves. The radio room at Station 47 is never silent. Even when no one's transmitting, there is the constant whisper of static, the heartbeat of the planet itself. You learn to tune it out like white noise until the static starts talking back. December 2015, I was pulling a double shift, covering for our normal radio man who had come down with food poisoning, or claimed that he had. Looking back, I think he knew what was coming. The seasoned staff always seemed to develop convenient illnesses when certain conditions aligned. It started out subtle, the static on Channel 16, the international distress frequency. It had a rhythm to it. Not Morse code, but not any pattern that I recognized. Just a cadence that sounded almost like breathing. By 0200 hours, the breathing had words to it. It was saying my name, barely audible beneath the static. I fine-tuned the receiver trying to clear the signal instead, and the voice became clearer. It said my name and then November 7, 492. My service number. I yanked off my headphones and stared at the radio. The speaker continued to whisper static-forming syllables that shouldn't exist.
Your daughter has your eyes. She draws butterflies on her math homework.
I reached for the power switch and then remembered Rule 6. When the radio static forms words, unplug it and wait until dawn. Not turn it off, unplug it. I pulled the power cord from the wall. The radio kept talking.
She's afraid of the dark now. It started last Tuesday. I won't say why.
My hands shook as I traced the power cable to make sure that it was truly disconnected. It was. The radio had no battery backup, no alternate power source. It was a dead piece of equipment speaking with the voice of the void.
You weren't there to check under her bed, but I was.
I grabbed the emergency fire axe from the wall. If the radio wouldn't stop talking, I would make it stop. But as I raised the axe, every other radio in the room, 23 different units, burst to life. They spoke in unison.
Would you like to know what's under her bed?
I stumbled backward, the axe falling from nerveless fingers. The radios continued, each one taking on a different voice. And they were all telling me things only I could know, secrets and memories that were weaponized into psychological warfare. And that's when one of my lieutenants found me. She took one look at the scene and immediately began unplugging all the radios. "Help me," she ordered. "Every unit, every connection, now." Even after we had unplugged all the radios, they continued for nearly 30 seconds before finally dying. The sudden silence was almost worse than the voices. "First time," my lieutenant said, collapsing into a chair. I nodded, not trusting my own voice. "Oh, it gets easier, not better, but easier." She pulled out a flask and took a swig before offering it to me. "The static knows things, everything that's ever been transmitted, every word spoken over radio waves. It all gets recorded in the background radiation. Sometimes something accesses those recordings." We waited until dawn as the rule demanded. As the first rays of sunlight hit the radio room windows, Lieutenant began plugging the unit back in. They hissed with normal static, innocent as sleeping snakes. Why dawn? Whatever lives in the static is nocturnal, or maybe sunlight interferes with their ability to manifest. Either way, they've never talked during daylight hours. Sometimes I wonder if they're trying to warn us, if the horrible things they say are attempts at communication from beings who don't understand human kindness. But then I remembered the story of a fellow worker who believed that theory. He would listen to them every night for a month, taking notes and trying to find anything repeating. We found him in the radio room one morning, every frequency tuned to dead air. He had modified his own vocal cords somehow, turned them into a biological radio transmitter. When he spoke, it was AM frequency 1540. We could only hear him through the radios begging us to kill him, to stop the things crawling through his neurons like living static. The medical evacuation team had to sedate him for transport. Even being unconscious, the radios near him would burst into whispered pleas. He's in a specialized ward now, they tell me, somewhere with no electronics, no frequencies, and no static. I hope that's true, and I hope he's found silence. You've heard my stories now, 6 rules, 6 nightmares that walk the edge between the possible and the impossible. But there's something else that you need to know, something that connects all of this together. Station 47 wasn't built to be a lighthouse, not originally. I found the documents 3 years ago, misfiled in a box of weather reports from the 60s. Classified papers that somebody had hidden rather than destroyed. Project Deep Anchor, the real reason they built an artificial island in one of the most remote stretches of the North Pacific. In 1962, something was detected on the ocean floor. Something massive, something that shouldn't exist. Something that was slowly but steadily rising. The math said that it would breach the surface in approximately 70 years. Station 47 was built directly above it. Not as a lighthouse, but as a monitoring station. The lighthouse was camouflage, a reason for people to be here without questions. The real purpose was to watch, to wait, and to warn. But something went wrong. The reports are fragmentary, pages missing or redacted. But I pieced together enough. The thing below, they called it the depth sleeper in the documents. It wasn't just rising, it was waking up. And as it stirred in its eons-long sleep, it affected reality around it, like a massive body turning over in bed, distorting the mattress of space-time. According to the last dated entry that I found, the sleeper was projected to fully wake in 2032, 7 years from now. When that happens, the rules won't matter anymore. The containment will fail. And something that's been sleeping since before the continents took their current shape will rise from the deep. But here is the thing that keeps me up at night more than any ghost ship or doppelganger ever could. I don't think that we're guards. I think that we're an alarm clock. Every incident, every time we follow the rules, we're sending vibrations down. Tiny pulses that say, hey, not yet, not yet, not yet. We're not protecting the world from the sleeper. We're protecting the sleeper's sleep from the world. Because in the reports, in the scrawls of scientists who understood what they had found, one phrase appears over and over. It's not the waking we should fear, it's what wakes it. So when I stand on the observation deck and look out at the endless black water, I sometimes see lights in the deep. Lights that seem to be getting closer every year. The other things, the ones that the sleeper hides from. We have 7 years to do something about this before the alarm finally goes off. Some things are meant to sleep, so let them.